Okay. Hi, good evening, everyone. We will take just a couple of minutes as everybody connects to the meeting and as everybody connects to the audio as well, so that you'll be able to hear all of our speakers, and then we'll just get started in a moment. Okay, well, it's 5:02, so I think we should be mindful of your time, and we'll get started. Hi, and welcome Dickinson parents and alumni to today's session. My name is Sarah Maslin-Fothery, and I'm the Director of Parent Relations here, and it's wonderful to have so many of you with us tonight. Whether you're a parent of a first year or a parent of a senior or a member of our alumni community, I'm very glad that you've logged in and that you've joined us for tonight's presentation. First, I want to thank so many of you for submitting your questions for our panelists in advance of this session. We know that these challenging times are affecting families in many different ways, and that you all have unique inquiries about what lies ahead. And we'll use our time together to respond to the questions that were submitted through the remarks of our panel. And if there are any questions that remain, you're welcome to submit those through the Q&A function in the webinar, and we'll address those as we are able. And you're also welcome to continue to submit questions to parents@dickinson.edu, and I will be happy to follow up with you after this presentation. Today's session is also being recorded and will be available after we conclude our time together today. So now I'm thrilled to have the opportunity to introduce Dickinson's President, Dr. Margee Ensign, to you. Margee's leadership and belief in Dickinson's mission to provide a useful liberal arts education for the common good for all of our students is inspiring. Her vision and leadership during these trying times has been even more critical and has helped us to remain not only stable, but strong and positioned well to support your students in any environment. I'm pleased to turn the session over to her for further introductions and for her own remarks. So thank you, Margee.
Thank you, Sarah, and greetings to parents and alums. We're so happy to have you with us this evening. Sarah, I thank you for all of your hard work and organization and vision. Let me first introduce my wonderful colleagues who are on the call with me. I will start with our Provost, Neil Weissman. I think most of you know him. Wave, Neil. Vice President for Student Life and Dean of Students, George Stroud. Damon Yarnell, our Associate Provost for Academic and Career Advising. And the newest member of our team, and we're all so thrilled to welcome Carlo Robustelli as our Vice President of Advancement. He comes to us from Illinois Wesleyan, where he was Assistant VP, deeply involved in his community. I have to say it's a perfect match. It's hard to believe Carlo's only been with us for, I think, a week. It feels like he's been here a lot longer. He's moving so quickly. So I'm going to turn it over to Carlo for just a few minutes to make some remarks to everyone. And once again, welcome, Carlo.
Thank you, President Ensign, and greetings. Good evening to alumni and parents. I'm really delighted to be part of the Dickinson community. This is really a special place. I don't have to tell you, you have entrusted us with your children, or if you're an alumni, you have benefited directly from the education that you've received and the benefits. From really the first time that I set foot on campus, it was really apparent that this was a place driven by its values and was focused on making a difference in the world. The students I've met are exceptional. They're thoughtful, intelligent, and they're just natural leaders. I don't have to tell you, they're your kids, so you know that. On Monday night, the college held the Rose Walters lecture with Armand Cohen, and the quality of the questions asked by students was really inspiring. For me, one of the things I love about working on a college campus is there's a thirst for knowledge, there's this yes we can attitude to get things done and solve problems, and there's a hopefulness for the future. And when you think about it, so much of our future rests in the hands of this generation, which I think has so many skills to offer the world. As Vice President of College Advancement, I have the privilege of working with diverse constituencies, including alumni and parents, and I've been so impressed by the sense of citizenship among the Dickinson community. I can tell you it is, it's really the envy of colleges and universities across the country. It's nice to know that there's an army of alumni and families that are here to support our students. And it makes a big difference. We know that that matters to young people, them feeling supported and engaged. Dickinson is a values-driven institution, and what I've seen just in my first week and a half or so is a place that values innovation and leadership and fosters a dynamic, collaborative culture. Providing the critically important resources that facilitate our values is what makes the work we do in advancement so important and so meaningful. We do what we do because we believe that if you provide a talented, deserving young person with opportunity, their potential is boundless. At the heart of my team's work is providing students with opportunities to have a world-class Dickinson education and distinctive experiences that help them discover their passions. I'd be remiss if I didn't make a plug for a really special program, something that is called the Revolutionary Challenge. The Revolutionary Challenge has been a year-long high-level idea competition for the greater good. It's going to set the course of our future. It's an exciting initiative, and we really would love your participation and input. So over the last year, we put a call out for big ideas that will help define our future, and we were blown away by the response. We had 49 proposals, and actually the latest number is almost 5,000 alums and parents and faculty and staff engaged in this process. So on October 29th at 7 p.m., please sign up. You can go to www.dickinson.edu/revolutionary and be a part of this exciting program. Thank you all for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about myself and about the reason that this is a really exciting opportunity and exciting place. I look forward to meeting many of you, and anytime you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to contact me directly. Thanks.
Thanks, Carlo. I'm sure you'll all agree with me. It sounds like he's been with us for a year. He's just jumped in with both feet and with excitement and vision. So Carlo, we're so happy to have you with us. So I'm going to group and try to answer all the questions related to, I call it the, how are we making our decision? The $1 million question, the spring. When are we making it? Where are we with testing? How would we handle quarantine? I'm going to speak, I think I've included most of the questions, and then the few that I can't fit under those categories, I'll go to individually. So let's just back up a little bit. Last summer, we had hoped to bring students back, and I made an announcement and had to reverse courses because, as Carlos said, we have said from the beginning, our priorities are health and safety of our community, and those are our values. And we felt strongly then, because of what had happened with testing, that we couldn't guarantee health and safety. At that time, there were very few options for us to do testing. In a pandemic, as you all know, testing must be rapid, it must be reliable. And the one national lab that had committed to working with us, their turnaround time went from 2 days when I made the announcement to 5 to 7 to 9 to 2 weeks. Fairly useless in terms of testing during a pandemic. So we had to pull the plug at that point. We are in far better shape now in terms of options for good, reliable, accurate testing with a quick turnaround. As you follow, many more labs have come forward with these tests and many more available to us in Carlisle. And I say that because the response to this pandemic has been a local one rather than a national one. And I'm not talking about politics, I'm talking about ability to respond to this. So we now have access to 5 or 6 labs, and we're making a decision about which lab we will choose and how frequently we will do testing. That was one of the questions. Depending on the test, there are different recommended testing times. So we're working on that. We have multiple committees with great expertise. We have a spring reopening committee that has students, faculty, and staff recommending to me their decision. That will come next week. We have a full board meeting at the end of next week, and I've committed to announcing the decision at the latest by the first week in November, and possibly before then. One question was, what about bills for the spring? They're not sent till the first week of January. So you'll certainly know our decision before, before those bills are due. How are we making the decision? As I said, multiple committees looking at this, and we're looking at a variety of scenarios for the fall. You follow our other colleges and universities around the country. Some have been all remote like us. A very few brought back all their students. They were mainly in more rural areas that were somewhat more self-contained from a community. Our surrounding colleges and universities that you know well, our Centennial Conference, the majority of them brought back selected students this semester. One of you wrote, are you drawing the lessons from others? We're drawing the good lessons and the bad lessons, right? There's one college close by. I'm so glad I'm not their president because they had a horrible experience. And that's not what we want for our students and our faculty and our staff. Others are doing relatively well. I'm on weekly calls. At the beginning of this, it was nightly calls with the 92 college presidents in Pennsylvania, private colleges. And of course, on Centennial calls, our athletic conference and so on. So we are very aware of what others are doing. What students come back, and as I said, we're looking at a variety of scenarios for this. We will have testing protocols in place. We will have rooms saved for quarantine and isolation. That was one of the questions. So we have to determine, and George's team has been working a lot on this, what rooms we would put aside for quarantine, because one of the lessons we learned from our friends and colleagues is that those quarantine rooms should be on campus, not in a hotel and not away from campus, so we can make sure that students are doing very well. So I think those are the majority of questions. I'm going to scroll through very quickly. One was on the bills. Let's see. If a student tests positive, as I said, and we do have a website up, our quarantine and isolation plan is on our website. We can send that to you, and we are working on our dashboard, which will be put up very quickly. We do have 168 students on campus, and not one has tested positive. I think the angels are watching us. We've been very fortunate. We have many international students with us and students who petitioned to be on campus for a variety of reasons. And Vice President Stroud can talk a little bit about some of the things we have not experimented, we've piloted with these students to make sure that we can bring students back safely in the spring. The question on how often will testing and tracing be done, we're making that decision. And if an individual tests positive, is he or she moved to a different building with their personal items? Yes, we will have quarantine space available. And can a student go home if they test positive? I'll be honest, we haven't made a final decision on that. I was on a call, believe it or not, last week with the White House, with Vice President Pence and Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, with an appeal from them to not send students home who are positive because they feel that's a big part of community spread. So we're looking at that, and I expect mandates actually before too long on that particular issue. So I think I've covered the questions on testing and tracing. Before I turn it over to Vice President Stroud next, let me reiterate that I believe more strongly than ever that a Dickinson education is the education needed for this moment of great uncertainty. When your children and the students at Dickinson are planning our future, the education they get is absolutely world-class and the best preparation for that uncertain future. And I thank Neil Weissman and everyone involved in the academics and our extraordinary faculty who are working nonstop to make sure whatever the delivery mechanism is, students are getting that great education. So George, if I could turn to you for some of the questions that have been addressed about student life. And I thank George and his whole team who also have worked tirelessly to keep students engaged during this challenging period. Thanks, George.
Thank you, Margee. And first, I'd like to just say hello to all the parents and alums who are out there. It is really great every year to interact with each of you during this time of year. Really wish that we could do it in person next year, I'm looking forward to next year, being an optimist, looking forward to next year that we can do it in person and interact with each other and be able to say hello face to face. There were a few questions that were presented that deal with my area that Margee did not touch on. And so I lumped them into two categories. One, housing, and the other piece was around quarantine and isolation and how we would handle some of those issues. As far as housing is concerned, there were questions regarding the housing assignment process and what would happen once we bring students back to campus. And so as Dr. Ensign has indicated, we have not made a decision yet as far as bringing students back to campus, but once we do that, then from the housing perspective, we will then determine how we're going to house our students, and the decision is also going to impact how many students. If we had a decision that we would bring back all of the students, then we would continue to maintain the housing assignments that were already assigned earlier this year. As you're aware, this summer, we issued all housing assignments to every student, including the first-year students, and then hired the RAs, and our RAs are functioning and helping us with some of the virtual programming that's going on throughout campus to try to make sure that our students remain engaged. And that's been very helpful, not only in the engagement piece of it, but our RAs have been very helpful in keeping us abreast as to what's happening with some of the students who would have been in their floor sections, so that we can reach out and know when students may be struggling, may need a little bit of assistance. And so that has been very, very helpful for us. But as I said, if we had made the decision that we were going to bring everyone back, the plan is to maintain those housing assignments, because those students have already, well, one, our upper class students chose those rooms, right, during the lottery process last year, and we want to keep that in mind. And two, these students have already started to build community within those groups. And so we would try to keep that as best as possible. However, having said that, Dr. Ensign did mention that we would need to carve out space for quarantine. And so we would need to figure that out. So there may be a few people that we need to move, but we would try to keep them together. If there's a decision to bring a partial group back, then the plan is to assign single rooms to every student. That would be the plan if we brought, so that would mean that we would reassign students throughout the campus to make sure that they would have single room accommodations if we only brought back partial. And again, that we would be following some of the safety guidelines that have been issued to us and making sure that in our minds and all the research that we've done, having single room accommodations is the best way to go about this, because if there was someone that would get sick, at least people would have their own space to retreat to and try be safe from the virus there. The other question that came up regarding housing was, what's the date that people can petition to come back to campus? And I'm assuming that that is, the question is based on if we only had partial students come back or whatnot. What I can say is, once we make the decision as to the plan as far as the institution is concerned, shortly thereafter, we will set those dates. We haven't done that yet, but we are mindful of the fact that that needs to happen soon because you all and your students need to plan for travel, especially those who are traveling from far distances. And I'm sure within the family structures, there are conversations that each of you need to have as to whether or not the families believe that it is a good decision to come back to campus or not. And so we're mindful of that and want to make sure that we provide you ample time to have those critical conversations. I will also say that once we do set the deadline, if there's a change in a student's status afterwards, and let's say that a student did not petition to come to campus, if there's a change in student status and we still have room on campus, we would still consider that, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the students have what they need or in a space that will allow them to be successful here at the college. And so please, if it changes, let us know. We will do whatever we can in order to make sure that the student gets the accommodations that he or she needs. There were some other questions that came under the category of the quarantine. And specifically, folks were asking if students who were quarantined, would they have single rooms, and would they have to share bathrooms, and would they be monitored? So the plan is, yes, we would quarantine folks in single room accommodations. Dr. Ensign mentioned that we would carve out space for quarantine. That space, the plan is for that space to be on campus, but yet we would not want to quarantine people together, because then you run the risk of people spreading the virus to each other, sick people or potentially sick people spreading the virus to each other, and we don't want to do that. So we would make sure that they had single room accommodations, and also that the plan right now is we are looking for those accommodations in spaces in which they would not have to share bathrooms. Again, we want to be mindful of the fact that if people have to quarantine, would not want them interacting with other individuals. And lastly, would they be monitored? Yes, they would. And I can tell you that our wellness center it has been working diligently throughout this process to put a good process in place in order to make this work. And so we have had students on campus who we've tested. All of them have come up negative thus far, but we did move them into quarantine while we were testing them. And we made sure that food was delivered to those students. We have a plan in place to make sure that that happens. And our wellness center staff did check on them regularly to see if their symptoms had changed or if they were symptom free, and to retest those students. And so we are pretty confident in the system that we have in place, and believe that it will work moving forward. The last question that was asked regarding quarantine was, could you go outside? If a person was quarantined, would they be able to go outside? And the answer to that is no. What we are saying, if you are in quarantine or isolation, we understand that folks may need fresh air, but please open your windows and get the fresh air that way. But we are requiring everyone to stay inside the unit that they would be moved to, relocated to for quarantine, because we would not want them spreading the virus to anyone else. And so this is purely a safety measure that we would ask everyone to follow. So those are the questions that came in. There are a few other things that I just wanted to touch upon quickly about some of the initiatives that we've moved forward, because we are planning for students to come back, but we are also mindful of the fact that life on campus may be a little bit different than it was pre-pandemic. And so because we have about 160 to 170 students on campus, we've been able to pilot a few things. And one is the fitness center. The fitness center is a big part of the community here for our students and our faculty and staff. And as you've probably heard throughout the country, there were many concerns about gyms as far as the spread of the virus in gyms. And so we've looked at that, and we've put a plan in place in order for the change would be, people were used to just walking into the fitness center and being able to work out on their own time. We've now put a system in place in which you're actually scheduling a time in order to go and work out. And not only do you schedule a time, but you also schedule what type of workout you want to engage in that day. What that does, it allows the staff to make sure that your equipment is ready for you when you get there. And it also gives them ample time to clean the equipment that was used before and after. And so this is really about safety. That would be a change. And it adds some time to it, but we have found thus far that we've been successful with that particular plan. And the folks who are using the fitness center right now have said that they really appreciate it. Actually, I just received an email from a faculty member who frequents the fitness center, and who said that the system, they were very happy with the system that we had set up. So that's an N of one, but that is someone who said that they were happy with that. We're also working with new virtual programming because, again, we want to make sure our students are engaged with one another. But if we can't come together like we used to, then we need to figure out other ways to do it. And so our Slice team has worked really hard in switching modalities quickly, just as our faculty have, in order to really make sure that we are figuring out what the students' interests are, how they can come together and really engage one another and be in each other's company, and learn from each other. Our student organizations have done the same. I was just in a student senate meeting last night, in which we had a really good and thoughtful conversation, but virtually. And so some of the programs that we've had have been so successful that we are really thinking about, even when we come back and things go back to normal, you know, we're thinking that we face to face, we would love to get back there, but there may be a place in the future for some technology to stay in to help out with the sometimes where it's very difficult to go to a program, but if it's virtual, maybe you can do both, participate in both programs. And so we're looking at that as well. And last but not least, we're looking at some pilot programs that will help us with overall campus safety, and incorporating a hybrid program in which there are some students and other non-sworn police officers that are added to the mix of our public safety staff, which will go and help to resolve some of the, what we're calling lower level situations that may arise and will interact with, again, gives our students a part, make them a part of the process in the safety initiative here on campus. And they are really excited about this. It's one that they have actually helped to generate this process with us. And so we're piloting that now. And it really looks promising. And so we're really, really excited about what will happen when all of the students come back. So those are just a few of the things that have happened in my area. And again, I'm looking forward to when we can come back. So I will now pass this on, I believe.
Let me just jump in for a second before we turn to Neil. Thank you, George. I'm sure all of you hear the passion in George's voice, his passion for students. It's very real, it's very genuine. I've worked with lots of VPs of student life and no one has cared more about students. So trust me, he's working very hard to keep everybody engaged. A couple things came up and we can come back to them, but I want to turn to Neil. But one is, yes, we know there'll be increasing need and demand on our wellness center for physical and mental health. We're figuring out how we can respond to that and to increase our capacity. George's team is also working on creating additional, I'll call them safe spaces for students to interact, because we know they will need it. You can't just be in your room or just in a classroom. You know, if it's big circles on the front, on the lawn when the weather's good, so that are 6 feet apart so students can interact. But we're taking that very seriously. The third is maybe the most important, the three ways things you must do to control a pandemic or manage it is the testing and tracing, as I talked about, but also behavior. And we will all have to commit to individual and collective responsibility for behavior. George is working on a compact or a contract that we will all sign, not just students. So we can come back to that, but I also want you to hear from our terrific provost, who has led the faculty for many years under a variety of challenging circumstances, this probably being the most. He's, as always, doing an outstanding job. And I know how hard the faculty worked from spring through the summer to prepare for this remote semester. So over to you, Neil, and thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Margee. And you're right. I've been doing my current job for over 2 decades, and this is the most challenging period of the bunch. I guess I'm going to try to be succinct about some really complicated topics, but I want to leave time for questions and conversation. First thing I would say is that we decided early that we would go remote, and it academically was very much to our advantage because faculty were able to focus on that, prepare for it, made a very substantial effort over the summer, set aside their own scholarship to do that. And the results thus far seem to have been very, very good. The overwhelming majority of the feedback that I've gotten, and that's from dozens of faculty, large numbers of students, parents, has been positive. That faculty say that students are dialing in, is the term that they like to use. Discussions are pretty active, that the work that's being done is pretty good. And so they're very positive about it. Faculty themselves will tell you that they're learning new tools that will be useful to them after this period. So for example, one very common practice that's been spreading in higher ed is this notion of flipped classrooms, where what you do is you take some of the material, say part of a lecture or an entire lecture that you were going to do in class, you put it online, and then you focus class on discussion and more active learning. Some of our faculty had already done some of that, but they're now really becoming expert at it. And so I think as we emerge from the other side of this, what was already a very strong academic program is going to be more innovative and I think better. That said, it's not perfect by any means. The number one complaint that I've gotten, and it's a handful, but I think it represents broader concerns, is that doing what we're doing now is exhausting, both for faculty and students. And I want to make a distinction here that I think is really an important one. We are not doing typical online instruction. Online is often asynchronous. In other words, the faculty put the materials up and then students have access to it independently when they have time. That's what frequently is done in online. What we're trying to do is different, and that's why I say remote instruction. Essentially, we're trying to take a Dickinson education, which is based on face-to-face interaction, human interaction between faculty member and students, and among the students themselves in real time, synchronous. We're trying to take that experience and put it in a remote context. And that takes a lot of doing. Faculty are, as Margie said, they've really thrown themselves into it. And I think are doing a really fine job, but they're wearing thin. And I hear this also from some students too, who, the term that pops up is Zoom fatigue, right? That they've reached a limit. I have to tell you, I started Zooming this morning at 8 a.m. and there's been no break. So I am feeling Zoom fatigue at the current moment. But, actually a couple of students said, well, faculty think that we're at home and have nothing better to do, and so they're piling on more work. This is not true at all. If any of your students or any alumni think that this is what's happening, I guarantee you it is not. But figuring out how much work to assign in a remote mode, how much of the content that you would normally cover in person, what are the right kinds of assignments, doing that remotely takes some figuring out. There are lots fewer exams and quizzes going on, a lot more writing assignments, reaction papers. Getting all of that right takes some doing. So in summary, we think it's gone well, but we know that there are challenges. One other challenge has to do with equity issues. We are discovering that, well, we knew this, but it's really being underlined, that different students have different levels of access, different levels of technology, different spaces where they can work privately or quietly, or maybe not. They're living in very different housing and family conditions. Many of them are coping with part-time jobs to help families that are in economic duress. And of course, there's pandemic itself, which can affect everyone. And it really actually, what it does is it makes it clear to us that an in-residence educational experience, a residential college, levels a lot of that out. Not all of it, but it helps when students are living in similar circumstances, have similar access to meal plans, have similar access to technology, to classroom, to faculty. And it's important for us to try to address that while we're in remote. And that's one of the reasons we brought some students back who simply couldn't function in a remote context. One conclusion of this, which is universal for everyone wants to be back in person. We've heard nobody say they want to stay remote. As the spring, really what Margie has said about who we bring back, everyone, part of the student body and so on, that will affect the kind of education and the kind of instruction that we're doing. There will still be some remote because we have faculty who have health issues and are in vulnerable populations and may not wish to come back, and they'll do their classes remotely. There will be mixed classes. High flex is the term that's used, which means some of the students are there in front of you under pandemic conditions, probably social distancing, masks, and others will be doing this remotely. And that's a challenge, and that'll be another learning experience for our faculty. So there will be a mix, no matter how many students we do or don't bring back, between remote, in-person, and then this combined high flex mode. One specific, well, actually, there's one question about the fall that I do want to speak to. Someone said, this was someone whose, I think it was daughter is not having a great experience and is feeling isolated and so on. And that parent wanted to know, are you going to learn lessons from the students in the fall? And the answer is yes. Most particularly, we did not do student evaluations last spring. We thought it was just unfair to faculty to emergency condition, push them on to remote, which many of them had never done, and then have student evaluations. But we did do student evaluations in our summer school, and we're doing them in the fall. And so we'll have lots of feedback to learn from. In terms of the spring, I had a specific question actually about study abroad. We have not yet decided about study abroad, generally speaking, in the spring. And it's a very open question on many levels, including whether or not American students would even be allowed to go to some of the places where we have sites. So that one will probably have a decision at the same time we decide about bringing students back to campus in the spring. We are working on a plan B in which a good number of our courses during the semester, the spring semester, should study abroad be canceled, will finish with an abroad dimension of 3 or 4 weeks. We'll use our centers. We can do this in a way that other schools frankly can't. And the notion would be a student would take a course, and then the last 2 or 3 weeks of it, which would be done in early summer, might be abroad. And we're going to try to do that as robustly as possible, especially if we have to cancel spring. As far as next fall is concerned, we are operating on the belief that we will be able to do study abroad. I was going to say per usual, but it may be more intensive even than usual, in that we'll have some rising seniors who would have done things in their junior year, and they'll be able to do it in the fall. Lastly, and very quickly, we've been focusing almost entirely on the pandemic and its impact, and for obvious reasons. It's right in front of us, it's important, health is involved. But you need to know the college is not only focusing on that. We are continuing to innovate. And so in the academic program, we received a $4 million gift last spring for a new program in Arctic studies that endowed a faculty chair, and it endowed funding for students during the summer to go, I was going to say to go into the field, I probably should say into the ice, and do advanced research work. We have the Revolutionary Challenge, and I too encourage you to dial in on October 29th. I'm very much myself looking forward to it. And then finally, just this week, the faculty approved a master's program, an online master's program in managing complex disasters. The intent here is to do some, to get a sense of what graduate work online might mean for us. I think it's an exciting possibility in many grounds, and its intent, by the way, we're not investing a great sum of money in starting it up. We hope that it will be a revenue generator. You should know that it is separate from the undergraduate program, and none of the funding or effort that's going to support the graduate program is going to be diverted away from the operating budget. That speaks to your children. So my point here is that, you know, we're working our way through this with, I think, a lot of energy. College is very nimble, but we're also continuing to think about the future.
Thanks so much, Neil. And I'm sure all of you heard in his voice and with everything he's doing, an approach that is innovative and that's flexible. And in the midst of all of this, innovation continues, as Neil and Carlo have said, with some new programs that we're establishing that are really responsive to everything that we're dealing with right now. I have to really agree with Neil that while we knew we knew there was inequitable access. We now see it right in front of us in so many ways. I was on a call recently with students, and one young man said, I asked students where they were coming from. And he said, well, I'm in an apartment with my 4 siblings. I'm in a closet right now. And I thought, okay, these are issues we must deal with even more so, and make sure that this great Dickinson education is available to many more. Many of you on this call have helped us with scholarships. That's going to be even more important as we go forward. We're going to try to get to questions. There's lots of them. I'm going to go to Damon, but if we don't get to your question, I want you to know, Sarah, if you could copy all of them, we'll get back to you individually. One I can answer very quickly. Will flu shots be required? We already require them. Anyone who's on campus, unless you have a health reason for not getting a flu shot, a documented health reason, already everybody has to have a flu shot who's on campus. Our current students who are there and the staff who are working to take care of those students. So, you know, one of the hallmarks of a Dickinson education is incredible access to internships, to advising. I think that's a big part of the glue that makes this work, and to career advice and placement. And Damon's doing an outstanding job coordinating our new center. So over to you, Damon. Thanks for everything.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I've been keeping my eye on the questions that have come up in Q&A and in the chat, and none of them are for me. So I'll be brief so we have time for questions. The first thing I'd like everyone to know is that we're open for business and have been throughout the last spring and the fall. As it happens, career and academic advising is a service that works well remotely, and as I think George indicated about some other areas, we're actually learning tools that we're going to extend into the future regardless, including the ability to hold office hours and appointments after hours on schedules that suit student lifestyle rather than working adult lifestyle. So we're open for business. We continue to have appointments, hold workshops, industry panels. The most recent industry panel we actually held yesterday was very successful on the field of consulting with a member of our board of trustees. And we had more than 40 students attend, so a great success. The second thing I'd like you to know is that we have continued to experiment and innovate. Even as we went remote, we held, for example, 2 virtual career fairs already this semester, the most recent of which was today, and attracted more than 200 student participants, closer to 250 actually. The third thing I'd like to share with you is just a glimpse ahead to the fall break. We're already planning over the fall break to hold a series of launch workshops, and working remotely, we will be able to accommodate student schedules no matter where students are located. That will be a really good chance for students either to catch up or get ahead on their career preparation using our 4-year career development pathway. And in addition, over the break, we'll be hosting virtual job shadows and career treks. So in sum, that's it. Like everyone, we miss seeing students face to face. Everyone who works on my team has chosen our field because we enjoy working with students so much. But as I say, working remotely, we've discovered that we can be very effective and actually have some tools at our disposal that are better in a remote setting than in person. And we're looking ahead not only to the winter break, but whatever lies beyond.
Thanks so much, Damon. And I know you and your team have done an incredible job working not only with current students, but with our students who graduated in the midst of all of this. You might just want to say a word or two about all the efforts that have gone into supporting them.
Sure, happy to. We reached out to the graduating seniors in the spring semester and to every single student individually, and offered them the chance to join what we call job search clubs. So we gathered 6 to 10 students randomly, not by industry, and helped them plan and execute their career exploration, or at that point, job search plans, and stayed with them as long as they wanted to work with us. And the good thing, and maybe the best thing about the job search club model, was that students could learn from one another and support one another, share tips and leads with one another as they navigated what was a challenging environment and continues to be so. But we met great success and continue to again work with those students who want to work with us. I just got an email last week from a student actually in India who had implemented all of our strategies and just wrote a gushing email of thanks to our team because they generated a successful full-time opportunity in her chosen field. So the work is ongoing, and as long as students are resilient and diligent and determined, our team's there, and we'll get them where they want to go.
Thanks, Damon. Thanks for your deep dedication to our students. I also thank our alums, those who are on the call, and all of them, because I'm seeing unprecedented support from alums, both financially with things like our emergency response fund, which those funds have gone to support students who didn't have computers, who didn't have access. George can talk more about that, but also for internships and jobs. I mean, I've really been so heartened that so many of you have reached out. One other question that came into me, I'm sorry I didn't talk about earlier, because it's a very important one, is how are we working with the community to ensure health and safety? Unlike some of the colleges who did bring everyone back this fall, many of them restricted students from going into their communities because their communities weren't 2 steps away from their front gate. We are part of the Carlisle community, and I'm really very proud of that. But of course, it presents the challenge that we need to make sure that with our guidelines that we are putting in place for return with testing and with masking and with social distancing has to be happening in the community, because we're not going to restrict students from going into the community. I'm really proud of how Carlisle has come together. Some of you may have read about it. Dickinson started something called the Carlisle Action Network, CAN. It's an appropriate name because Carlisle can, we've decided, do anything, even in the most challenging of times. 92 people are on a weekly call. That includes all of our political leadership, our business leadership, Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Business Alliance, all the faith-based leaders from every faith, the nonprofits. It goes on, and we've come together to say anything that comes at us, we can solve. So I wish I had time to go into tell you how we've handled food security and health and transportation and so on. But we did launch a few weeks ago an initiative, again, that Dickinson is leading for masking and social distancing. So all the businesses in a week will have masks that say Carlisle can, shop safely, learn safely. Masks will be in place. Even the chief of police is having his officers carry him in his car to make sure if they see anyone without a mask, they hand them to them. That at the moment is one of the most important public health interventions we can make to prevent this pandemic from spreading. So it's a community-wide effort. Businesses who support it, that's who we'll tell our students, go to those businesses. And that's what the Downtown Business Alliance and the Chamber is saying. We all want to support the businesses that are following these public health regulations. So no one's shaming anyone. It's a very positive Carlisle can, and it's quite extraordinary. Even the banners on High Street in a week or so, we'll talk about Carlisle can. So it's not only a positive thing to be telling you, it's an essential component of a strategy to bring students back to campus and have them learn in a safe environment. So I think that's critically important. David Singer has asked, how likely is it that you make a decision in early November and you change it 8 weeks later? David, perfect question. very understandable. I will always say, however, that it's health and safety that drives our decisions. At the moment, we have testing in place. At the moment, we have tracing in place. We're going to put a plan for responsibility, personal and collective, in place. There is a chance that the flu this year could be terrible and overlap with the pandemic. So that would be one thing we'd have to look at. I'm hoping not to have to reverse the decision, but I'm not embarrassed ever by making a decision based on the values of health and safety. So hopefully we won't have to do that again, but we always have to be open to new evidence of things that are emerging. On ventilation, we've worked on that in the cafeteria and in many of our buildings. I guess the good news about being a couple hundred years old is that our windows still open. And if you read all the recent evidence on this, it's opening windows that the infectious disease experts are saying is critically important. Of course, that's going to be tough when it's cold, but read the recent article about Sweden. The kids are actually holding their classes outside and they're telling them to bring blankets to class. We won't do that, but we are making sure that we have in place and are improving our air ventilation. I don't know who asked. Someone asked, can the local alums schedule times in the fitness center? I don't know, George, that's one for you quickly.
Yep. So that's a really good question. And that's one that we've talked about a little bit as we did the reopening. At this time, the answer is we're not doing that at this time. The reason being is we are still trying to figure out the right staffing, the right schedule to service our students and our current faculty and staff, and also trying to put into place with the new program what happens when we have our the rest of our students come back and fitting that in. We are going to continue to, as we bring more students back and as we see what our capacity is to increase, then we will continue to reevaluate that and move out. So we have not forgotten about our local alums, but we do need to be mindful and make sure that we can service the students and the faculty and staff who are here right now, and then continue to spread out and wrap our arms and provide those services to everyone else.
Thanks, George. To Daisy, Harley, do you have a plan for what happens if a student tests positive and is not recovering well? Transport to hospital if needed. First of all, Daisy, students will be monitored very, very carefully. You heard George. His staff is just like him, so they'll be monitoring those kids if we had positive cases, and of course we would transport them to the hospital. One of the positive things about this Carlisle CAN effort is that our hospitals are on that call, and I think we have better relationships with UPMC, with Sadler, than we've ever had before, at least in my time here. And you may or may not know that at the beginning of the pandemic, Dickinson offered a residence hall to doctors and nurses to stay if the local infrastructure, health infrastructure, was overwhelmed. Fortunately, we never got to that point. The positivity rate in Carlisle has stayed about at the state average, which is 3.7%, which is comparatively low. But the point here is, yes, we would, we'll monitor them. We would know if anybody's in trouble, students, faculty, or staff, and we would get them to the hospital as needed. Gloria, I don't know if there's going to be a parent weekend in the spring. Sarah, over to you on that one.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. You know, it's nothing that we've discussed yet. Of course, as everybody has said, we miss the entire Dickinson community, and that includes our parents as well. We love this time of year being able to welcome you back and doing the same in spring. You know, we'll have to see if it's something that we can safely and responsibly do, but, you know, nothing's off the table yet.
Thanks, Sarah. Kathleen, our goal is to try to bring back the whole student body, if not all at the same time. We're not there in making that decision. How would we justify bringing some other than others? It's a really hard question. I will say we're deeply committed to bringing seniors. This would be their last semester on campus, but that doesn't mean we don't care equally about the rest. I do want you to know that our local Pennsylvania liberal arts colleges, you know, all of them brought back selected students this semester and are from what I've been told, that is their plan also for the spring. The ones that we follow who brought all of them, some have had good experiences. They're generally a little more remote. Some have had terrible experiences. We monitor this constantly. Every day we're getting in new evidence. So we will, we're still, as I said, we have not made our decision yet. Let's see, there's more questions. Could the spring calendar change based on opening? Yes. We might not have a spring break. We're not there yet. There's a chance if the flu overlapped badly with the pandemic. We're talking about a possible later start. None of those decisions have been made. I'm just sharing with you some of the scenarios that we're considering. How are we facilitating advancement and increasing alumni engagement? I think Carlo talked a little bit about that. So on their own, alums have come forward. I'm really proud of that. Secondly, I think the Revolutionary Challenge has been a huge success on many levels. We didn't know a year ago we were going to be in a revolutionary moment, but that's Dickinson. We're a little ahead of the curve. And honestly, when we hatched this thing and talked about it in my office, we were privately saying, if we got 5 to 10 proposals, we'll be happy. And if 1,000 alums were engaged, that would be a real sign of success. Soon as it was announced, proposals started coming in, more than advancement, I think, could handle at first. But to have 49 proposals and over 5,000 alums engaged with this, that's a real mark of success. And I know Carlo's gonna carry that forward. We all know how important our alums are to our future, not just our financial future, but the things that Damon's doing with students. So I thank all of you, and I know Carlo has some additional ideas for engaging alums. So I think we got through most of them. If we didn't, we'll copy them and get back to you individually. Thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Gloria. Any final thoughts from anyone on the panel?
Well, I'll just say I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with each and every one of you. And again, I enjoy working with your students and really look forward to the time, hopefully very, very soon, that we'll be able to do this again in person with each other. And so everyone stay safe. And please, please, please keep us in mind.
Yeah, I would just add, endorsing everything George has said. Actually, Margie didn't mention it, but I'm a former Dickinson parent, and I am currently a Dickinson grandparent. So technically, I could be sending in tough questions myself, but I've restrained myself. The questions and issues that you've raised are really important ones. They're right on target. And please be in touch with us. If you have questions, if you have feedback, if you have sons or daughters who are out there operating remotely, we really do want to hear how people are doing. And we really are, as Margie said, anxious to answer any questions you might have.
So just one final word, you can always get to me and anyone on this panel with any questions. Just write to president@dickinson.edu and we will make sure, if I'm not the best person to answer your question, we'll get somebody to answer it. I wish I could see all of you and see your faces. And I hope we can do that in person before too long. Really grateful for your dedication and commitment to Dickinson. Thank you, Sarah, for organizing this. As George said, stay safe. Take care of those wonderful Dickinson students who we love, and alums. Thank you for everything. Good night.
Thank you.